if you had to tell riders out there maybe one thing that they could do immediately to be a better rider.
Probably the most important thing is using your head and eyes, looking way above your path of travel. I've heard this a million times. And so many bikers that get into a crash, it happened so fast, I couldn't do anything. What they're really saying is, I wasn't looking far enough ahead and I didn't recognize the threat. And when I did recognize the threat, it was too late. And I kept staring at the threat until I hit the threat. So that's the most important thing, knowing where to look and when to look there.
Welcome to Riding Counsel with Rich Jaffe, where the open road meets expert advice. I'm Richard Jaffe, an attorney and biking enthusiast, and this is the podcast where we dive into the world of motorcycling, safety, culture, charitable giving, and riding right. So, whether you're a seasoned rider or just getting started, let's talk bikes, the road, and everything in between. Let's ride! Good morning to another episode of ridingcounsel.com, motorcycle law and charity, a guide to riding right. And today I have an amazing podcast guest with me today. I am so honored to have him here. Of course, his name is Mr. Jerry Palladino. He probably needs absolutely no introduction, but I wanted Jerry to tell him a little bit about himself. It's probably a lot better than me doing it because, quite frankly, I'm a little starstruck. So, Jerry, if you can introduce yourself and tell us about yourself, that would be great.
All right. Well, I said my name is Jerry Palladino, but people know me as the Motorman. And I guess it's easiest for me to start from the beginning how this happened. I've been riding motorcycles since 1974, but with no instruction. Just a friend of mine said, "Follow me." That was the only instructions I had. And then in 1999, the agency I worked for started a motor unit. It was very political, so I didn't put in for it because I knew the people who were going to put in for it were well connected to the sheriff, and it would be a waste of time. So that's what happened. They picked three guys, and one of them was, I think at the time, was like 60 or 65 years old, and he had a motorcycle license, but like me, he didn't know anything. So he goes to motor school and down in Tampa with the sheriff's office down there, and I think he broke his ankle the first week. So anyway, I heard about that. Now they're down to two guys, and I was walking in at the end of my shift, and a lieutenant and major were coming out of the sheriff's office, and the major says, "Jerry, do you have a motorcycle license?" I said, "Sure do." "So you want to go to motor school?" I said, "Yeah, okay." So they said, "Well, okay, we're gonna send you up to Tallahassee to train with the highway patrol because the class in Tampa is already a week into it, and you can't join in the middle." So that's what happened. And then I knew a lot of state troopers. There was, I think, 20 of us initially in the class, and I talked to some of the guys, and some of them had no motorcycle license, never been on a motorcycle in their life, which I was astounded that they take people like that, but they did. And the first day, he's like a drill instructor type guy. He comes up, he says, and he holds the keys to a Harley. He says, "Anybody here know how to ride a motorcycle?" Now I know that could be a loaded question, but I figured he meant, he knew that some of these guys were never on a bike. So I raised my hand, and he jumps in my face. He says, "You don't know nothing about riding a motorcycle." He said, "But you're going to know if you make it through this course." And he was right. About the first day in, I realized that I didn't know anything about. I was using my instincts, and when it comes to riding well, it's the exact opposite of your instincts. When I finished that course, I said, "Boy, this is everybody who rides a motorcycle should know the police motor officer techniques, and they should know what a motorman is because it's about the toughest thing you could do in the police agency, much tougher than the SWAT team and things like that." So when I got out of there, I said, I got to find a way to reach people all over the country, and the internet was just starting to get popular at the time. So I was on a couple of motorcycle forums at the time. I had a BTX 1800, which is a really big, heavy, clumsy motorcycle. And I had my signature picture or a thumbnail was me making a U-turn on that bike within 2 parking spaces, which is 18 feet. So people said, "Well, wait a minute, is that photoshopped, or how the hell you do that?" I said, "No, I'm a motor officer, and it's one of the things that we learn, how to handle any motorcycle like a toy." And I said, "Would you like to know about these motor officer techniques?" There's just 3 of them. And if by what means would a video be good, an instructional video? And everybody, responded, "Yeah, they'd love to see that." And then I said, "Well, how much would you pay for such a video?" and I got anywhere from $20 to $100 for such a video. So I said, okay, I'm going to make a video and I'm going to put it for sale on the internet. It took me about 4 months, and people were really hounding me. Where's that video? Where is it? So it took about 4 months before I got what I considered a sellable video. And the very first day I put it online, we sold 80 in one day.
Wow.
And
Wow.
I think I've got something here that this might be the best idea I ever had. And the video was, the quality of it was okay, but the sound wasn't really good. So after about a month of selling that video, I had a professional guy, because I did the first one with just a friend of mine and his camera. And I found a guy who'd done videos before, and we did a really good, the sound was perfect. Everything was pretty good. And that was the first video. We called that Ride Like a Pro 2, but it was
This episode has been brought to you by Riding Counsel. Don't forget to visit us at ridingcounsel.com.
we were selling 70 or 80 of them every day. And this is on VHS.
Hmm.
And I used to have a stack of VHS, and I would record them. We did this, myself and my wife. We did it all at home. In fact, we had to then hire a couple of people to work in the office with us because it got so popular. And then as things went on, and I met a guy who was specialized in actual motorcycle videos. So I did Ride Like a Pro 3 with him. And then all my other videos from that point on, I did with this guy. His name was Jim Miller. Great guy, and he knew exactly where to put the camera, so I didn't have to be director anymore. I could just say what I was going to do, explain it, demonstrate it, and I got, I think by that time we had 7 or 8 different types of motorcycles, because I wanted people to know that as long as the bike has 2 wheels, one in the front and one in the back, the techniques are going to work. Doesn't matter if it's a sport bike, a cruiser, tour, or whatever. And after that, people said, well, how about a school? I got the video and I would like to go to a regular school. So I came up with a school, and that started going really well. In fact, it got so popular, I was turning people away. I think our biggest class was 17 people, and it got to be a bit much. So I got an assistant, and then I taught my wife the techniques, and she's a little tiny thing that weighs like 110 pounds. And I would have her at the class do the demonstrations. I would explain what she's doing. And the point was, I wanted guys to see that if this little tiny woman can handle a 900-pound motorcycle like a toy, you could do it too. And it was good motivation. And then we started spreading out around the country. I think initially, at one time, we had 20 franchises, but some of the guys have retired since then. So we have now 15 here in the US and one in Japan. And it's been just a joy. When you do something that you like to do, you love doing, it's not even a job. I look forward to every class that's coming, and I look forward to talking to people on the internet and doing my YouTube videos and stuff. So it's been a great life. I'm a really lucky guy.
That's really wonderful. That's awesome. And I'm sure a lot of my watchers and listeners are really thanking you right now for all the time that you spend teaching us all about motorcycle safety. But with that said, what can you talk about some of the most common mistakes that you see are made by motorcycle riders?
Um, you mean at the class or in general?
No, like in general, I mean, there's classes like you, which I suggest everybody take. But out there, there's a lot of people riding around with motorcycles, and they say, I have, 50 years experience riding motorcycles, so I know what I'm doing, and but they still make mistakes, I'm sure. Do you see a lot of motorcycle riders, making mistakes that are pretty common throughout, all of the motorcycle riders, no matter what level?
Yeah, it's the most common one I see is people don't know how to use their head and eyes. And of course, that means wherever you turn your head and eyes, your hands are going to follow. So that's where the motorcycle goes. But it's against your instincts. Your instincts tell you to look at the guardrail, look at the oncoming car, look at the pothole. And of course, if you look at those things, you're going to hit them. The other thing that amazes me is that people haven't figured out how to use the clutch and throttle on a motorcycle. They only know how to start off smoothly and shift gears. But especially for low speeds where everybody has a problem, I don't care, guys riding, most people come to me, been riding 20 years or more. And I'm astounded that they haven't figured out how to use that clutch and throttle to just to maneuver the motorcycle at low speeds. I mean, it's a necessity. It's not a matter of opinion. You got to do that. And motorcycle manufacturers know this. That's why they have wet clutches, so that you could slip the clutch as you turn your head and eyes, and put a little bit of pressure on the rear brake, and it just steadies the motorcycle and makes things so much easier. I mean, you could do it with the clutch fully engaged on some bikes, but on a big bike, you fully engage that clutch, and the slightest movement of the throttle is going to cause the bike to straighten up and leap ahead as if it has a mind of its own. And of course, it doesn't. But when you're, I mean, everybody's seen now on YouTube. Before I started, you never saw this stuff, but they have police competitions, and people are amazed how these guys go through those tight cone things. And it's just a matter of using three techniques: head and eyes, friction zone, a little pressure on the rear brake, and looking where you want to go before you get there.
It sounds like it's a lot about going back to the basics, learning the basics and not trying to get so fancy. And that's really going to lead to more safer riding. Am I right there?
Yeah, well, the basics, as far as what like they teach you in basic school, they touch on all these things that I just mentioned. But the difference between that and what you get with motor officer training and what I teach is the degree to which you use the techniques. If you use the techniques a little bit, you'll be a little bit better rider. If you use them for maximum effect, you'll be a superior rider. In fact, you'll be riding like a pro. And I've gotten people down to my class generally runs 4 to 5 hours. And people say, well, what could you possibly learn in that time? Well, at the end of 4 or 5 hours, it's an intense course. They are tired. I mean, they're wiped out because when I first started, I was running an 8 hour class. And I noticed after 4 or 5 hours, people started getting worse. And it was because they were so stressed out and their tension on the handlebars and their body was stiff. And yeah, that wears you out. You can't do that. So I found out that 4 hours is the charm. People get to a certain level, and I tell them, if you never practice this, what you learned today, if you never go out and practice at least a half hour a week, you're going to revert right back to where you were this morning because they're perishable skills. And it's worked out really well. I've taken some riders that I don't know if you've seen some of the videos. I think I have one called "This is what it looks like to be afraid of leaning your motorcycle." And I think it's up to like
Yeah, I saw that one.
this girl Linda, and she was just horrible. I mean, if you saw her, you'd say, "How did this girl live to ride to the class?" And I often ask myself that. But she had determination, and that's what you need. If you have a very high fear level, I call it a fear level between 1 and 10. 1 is the lowest fear level, 10 is the highest. Well, she was about a 10 and a half, but she was determined. So I said, I'm going to take her, I'm going to give her a private lesson. I'm going to put her first on a bicycle, have her run the course on that, and then graduate little by little, starting with really big U-turns and circles and exercises. And I think she spent a total of about 8 hours with me in addition to the first 4 hours. And then she came back to me in 3 months later, and it was just an astounding difference in what this girl could do because she was determined. Sometimes people just will quit halfway through the class. I've had riders, they'll make several mistakes and then they'll just take off out of the parking lot, not say a word, they're gone. And they're never coming back and they're never going to learn because I don't know, with guys a lot, it's an ego thing. They feel, they see other riders doing better than them. So it frustrates them so much that they just want to get out of there.
Well, it's a lot to learn. I mean, going through your class, it's nobody can learn something in like 10 seconds. I mean, it's really necessary to go through your entire class to actually get the most benefit out of it. But if you had to tell riders out there maybe one thing or maybe two things that they could do immediately to be a better rider with, I mean, of course they have to go to your course and go through all of the proper training, but maybe just like one small little hint about what they could do to be a better rider.
Probably the most important thing is using your head and eyes, looking way above your path of travel. I've heard this a million times. It's so many bikers that get into a crash. It happened so fast, I couldn't do anything. What they're really saying is, I wasn't looking far enough ahead and I didn't recognize the threat. And when I did recognize the threat, it was too late. And I kept staring at the threat until I hit the threat. So that's the most important thing, knowing where to look and when to look there. And I tell people out on the road, just look 12 seconds ahead. If you see a car that might cross your path, getting ready to pull out, if you're looking 12 seconds ahead, you got 12 seconds to come to some type of understanding as to what you're going to do. Am I going to go around to the left, to the right? If you're looking 100 feet in front of the motorcycle, yeah, it doesn't matter. At 40, you're covering 60 feet in 1 second. So if you're not looking far enough ahead, it's going to seem as if it happened all of a sudden. You couldn't do anything. But if you're looking far enough ahead, your path to travel as far as possible, 12 seconds is the general rule. Everything seems to happen in slow motion, and you can come up with a plan to avoid a crash should the absolute worst occur, like the car then starts to pull out. Well, you've already thought, I'm going to go to the left. There's no cars to my left. There's nobody coming behind that car. So I got plenty of room. So you got 12 seconds to come up with a plan. And that's really a long time. And you'll never have to say, uh, it happened so fast, I couldn't do anything about it.
So there's a lot of new things on modern motorcycles these days. ABS brakes, RDRS system, all kinds of gadgets. So what's your take on all these kinds of things that are being added to the modern bikes?
Well, I think it's great. It's like, years ago when you had one drum brake in the back, and then they came out with a drum brake in the front as well. And people say, why do I need that? It's much more too complicated. But everything they've added with especially ABS has just been a lifesaver. The most common problem or mistake that people make when they had to stop quickly was because they're used to driving a car, they slam on the rear brake. When you
Right.
do that, you lock up that rear tire and the bike starts to low side. If you release that brake and you're going 30 or 40 miles an hour, you're going to then high side, and that's the worst kind of crash. So yeah, it's uh, all these things help. The cornering ABS, I have that on my bike. Um, that's for a person gets into a turn and they feel that they're going too fast, which usually isn't the case. But they feel like they're going too fast, so they tend to straighten up the motorcycle and then they run right off the curb. That's the second most common motorcycle crash, failure to negotiate a curb. But with the cornering ABS, you can actually hit both brakes as hard as you want, and the computer will stop those tires from locking up, and your turn might get wider, but generally you won't be into the next lane, and you could stop much quicker. Of course, if the bike is straight up, but most of the time you're coming around a blind curve and now there's sand in the road, you don't have time to straighten up the bike. But with the cornering ABS, you can clamp down on those brakes. The bike is not going to low side. It's going to slow you enough to where you should be able to avoid whatever it is you're trying to avoid. So yeah, all these things they come up with. I mean, you can't overcome stupid. I've seen people screw things up so bad that there's no electronic device that's going to help them. But for the most part, everything I've seen that they've added to motorcycles safety wise has saved a lot of lives. It used to be, like I said, the most common. I would go to a crash scene involving a motorcycle, and there's a long black streak. That tells me it's that back tire. They locked the tire, and then they smashed into whatever it was while they were sliding on the ground. And say, well, if and they always say, I had to lay the bike down. All that means is I don't know how to use the front brake or how to stop quickly, so I jammed on the rear brake and hoped for the best, and the best didn't happen.
Well, you definitely touched on something there. The mentality of riding a motorcycle, and I think the mental aspect is just as important, if not more important, than the physical aspects. Can you talk a little bit about the mental aspects of being prepared to ride a motorcycle whenever you're going to go out there?
What I always do before I go for any kind of ride is I pull out of my driveway. The street in front of my house is 24 feet wide, so I'll start doing a couple of U-turns and some figure eights, and I'll spend 10 minutes doing that so that I've got my skills as sharp as they could possibly be. And I'm always thinking that I don't want the worst to happen, so I'm going to look as far ahead of my path to travel as possible to prevent that situation where, well, it happened so fast I couldn't do anything. So yeah, mentally, if you're listening to the radio and you're not paying attention, if you're riding your motorcycle like you're driving your car, yeah, you're probably a crash looking for a place to happen. But if you get really good on your motorcycle and you use those same safety techniques in your car, you'll be a much better driver, and you'll realize, well, you've got that metal around you and you got the airbags. You don't have any of that on the motorcycle. So you got to make sure you don't run into anything. In the car, it's not so bad. It's going to smash the fenders. But I've heard from people so many times that they say learning the proper techniques, practicing on the motorcycle made them a superior driver than they were before, because now they're thinking, well, if I was in my motorcycle, what would I be doing? So in the car, that there's a car that might turn left in front of you. I've seen most people don't even slow down. They don't brake, don't do anything. But on the motorcycle, they know they've got to do those things. They got to start covering the brakes. And then they start thinking about that in the car. What would I do on my motorcycle? Well, I'd get off the gas. I'd be looking further ahead. I'd try to find an escape path so it makes you a better driver as well as a better motorcycle rider. And like I said, most of the people that come to me have been riding for many years. But if you think about what they're really doing, yeah, if you've been riding for 20 years, you've been cruising straight down the road, making great big wide turns once in a while and coming to a nice easy stop. Well, it should take you about one day to get good at that. So if you're doing that for 20 years, you got 1 year's experience repeated 20 times. It doesn't help you when something gets in your way because that's when you got to lean, swerve, or turn and do it very quickly. And most people, the first exercise we do was a slow cone. Cones are 15 feet apart, and all they got to do is weave through them. Well, every time people are just knocking it. It's like bowling. And I tell them, well, if you got 6 cones there, you knocked 5 of them over, pick up the spare on the way back. But a lot of people don't bowl anymore. I get the joke. But I say, if you can't do this simple little swerve, when you're cruising down the road and there's some parked cars on the street and somebody opens up the door, what are you going to do? You're going to look at that door and hit it. But if you know how to do this little swerve, this quick swerve at 10 miles an hour, you know how to avoid that. And in fact, everything we do in the class has relations to situations out on the road, with the exception of the figure eight. And people say, well, I never have to do a figure eight on the road. Well, you're right. But in order to do a figure eight, you have to use all the techniques at one time. You got to turn your head and eyes very quickly. You got to be in the friction zone. You got to have a little bit of pressure on that rear brake to help control the motorcycle. So it builds overall riding strength, just like going to a gym and you do bench presses. Everybody does a bench press. Well, how does that help you in real life? Well, it builds strength in your upper body and makes every physical activity you ever do much easier because you're a stronger person. And it's the same thing with that figure eight that we work on. And sometimes I'll put in 3 circles or call it the snowman. And that you're turning the bike quickly to the left, then to the right, and then back to the left again. And you better put all 3 techniques together or you're just going to be knocking over cones. I tell people there's no straight part to a circle. So if you're making a circle and your head goes straight, the circle is going to be gigantic because as soon as you straighten your head, you straighten the bars and you run right off the course.
Yeah, so I mean, it's all these techniques that you're not just pulling them out of the air. I mean, you went to school for this, and I'm sure the techniques in the school that you went to, where you learned in law enforcement, they it's developed not over 1 year or 2 years, but it was quite a number of years that they developed all these techniques, imparted that onto you, and these are the techniques that you're talking about giving to other people.
Right. Yeah. They've been teaching this stuff to the cops since I think it's about 75 years now. And when I finished the motor officer course, I said, I can't believe that nobody ever thought of, as a motor cop teaching other people these things. And luckily for me, the internet was just coming out. So I was able to tell people about it, show them on video what the motorcycle is capable of. Most people, especially if you ride a Harley or a Goldwing, they can't make a simple U-turn on your average street, which is 24 feet wide. A Harley, you'll turn in 16 feet. So you got a lot of room to screw up and still make it. But for the most part, I would say 98% of the riders out there can't make a simple U-turn. If you can't do that, how are you going to avoid that car that pulled out in front of you at 70 miles an hour? You don't know what to do. You're a crash looking for a place to happen.
Yeah, it's real important to have fun while you're riding, but we all have to ride responsibly too. Can't just go
Absolutely.
out there and say, "Hey, I got a license, here I go," and just be a cowboy out there.
Yeah, there's so many people that get into crashes, and it's just they say that it's I think it's Dr. Hurt. I mean, have you heard of the Hurt report?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, he's uh, he's investigated, I think it's 600 accidents where a rider failed to negotiate the curve. And in every one of the cases, he found the motorcycle was capable of going through that turn at the speed the rider was going. But the rider wasn't capable because he didn't know what to do. He looked at the guardrail, the oncoming car, whatever it may be, the cliff, and went off of it because he didn't know simple, easy techniques that they do take 3, 4 hours to master. And after that, if you continue practicing, you get better and better. Like I said, you never practice again, you're going to revert right back to where you were.
So I'm hoping you might be able to or willing to share a story maybe that is a memorable one when back in the day you were a motorman for law enforcement or uh, wherever you worked. Is there any kind of memorable story that you have as a motorman that you can share with us?
Well, I got a few of them, but one of them that comes to mind is I was on my motor and I'm riding down the street. In front of me, maybe 100 yards ahead, is a guy and his wife or girlfriend, whatever she was, on the back of the bike. And we're going about 40, 45 miles an hour. And a car pulls right out of the gas station directly in front of this biker.
Hmm.
And he almost hits it. I mean, it was just, I held my breath. I was saying, this is it. But he was lucky enough to where he was able to swerve out of the way, lock the rear wheel a little bit, almost high sided, but it didn't happen. So there's no crash. So they say, there's never a cop around when you need it. So I saw the whole thing. So I pulled up alongside him and I said, follow me. And then I pulled that car over. And the guy said, "Yeah, I never saw him." I said, "Well, that's because you weren't looking." So I wrote him a ticket. And then I went back to the biker and I said, "Hey, if I need you as a witness in court, would you be willing to show up?" I said, "They're always on Wednesday nights. It just takes a few minutes." He said, "Yeah." And I got his name, his information. I said, "And don't ever say there's not a cop around when you need one."
That's great. That's great. I'm glad you were there. I'm glad you
Yes.
were there for him. So, well, Jerry, you shared so much information with us, and I'm sure that there's so much more to learn from you. And anybody who knows you, I'm sure would agree with me. If somebody wanted to take a look at some of the things that you do, maybe interested in your CDs, your courses, anything at all, can you tell us how we could get in touch with you?
Well, I have my YouTube channel is the Ride Like a Pro channel, and I have, like I said, probably 1,600 videos in there, at least 1,000 of which are on tips, tricks, and techniques. I also do reviews on things, but I have a website which is also called Ride Like a Pro. That's where you could sign up for my classes and you could see all the videos I have available. We're switching now from DVDs and USB to pretty soon, within the next 2, 3 months, is going to be strictly downloads. We still get, believe it or not, about 30% of our people that want DVDs, but the computers that you bought in the past couple of years, laptops, don't even have a DVD player. So that's why we're going to be switching to it. But ridelikeapro.com is my website, and the Ride Like a Pro channel on YouTube. And I also came out with a new channel. So one of the things I really enjoy, one of my hobbies, is muscle cars. And I came out with a new channel called Muscle Cars Old and New. And I got probably 6 or 7 videos I put up there. And I got to get 1,000 subscribers before you could monetize. So I'd appreciate if people go to Muscle Cars Old and New, and you'll see some really good stuff on there if you're into cars. Most people that are into motorcycles are also into cars.
Yeah, yeah. So a lot of cross interest there. And I'm sure a lot of watchers and listeners are going to do that. And just in case, I'm going to put all your information, anybody watching on YouTube or video, I'm going to put all the information down here in the comments section. So in case there's any question about where the websites or the YouTube channels are, so we'll make it easy to get Jerry at least 1,000 subscribers. I'm sure he's going to be well above 10,000 very fast.
Yeah. Well,
So
on my Ride Like a Pro channel, I think I've got 320,000 subscribers, but it took a while to get that. COVID really helped me because everybody was sitting at home looking for something to do. And I think during COVID, we picked up 100,000 subscribers.
you also you're down in Florida now, is that right, Jerry?
Yeah, we're just north of Tampa. I live in Hudson, Florida, which is near Newport Richey area, Spring Hill.
So you're going down to Bike Week, Daytona Bike Weeks in a couple of days. Any plans to get down there?
Yeah, I usually go over for one day. In fact, I'm going to do a video. I'll probably put up Saturday and tell people I'll be there. And I always run into a whole bunch of people that know me. And I only go for the day, but I'm thinking Monday or Tuesday, I'm probably going to be over there. And I always go to the racetrack first, then I go down Main Street and then up to Destination Daytona. And I tell people, come up, say hello. I've always got some swag to give out too.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. Well, I'm hoping to get down there too, so hopefully I'll see you down there. But in the meantime, everybody can have an easy time finding you online with all the information that's down below here. And that'll about do it for this episode of ridingcounsel.com, motorcycle law and charity, a guide to riding right. And we are really thrilled to have spent some time with Jerry Palladino, Ride Like a Pro. And it's really been amazing having you, Jerry, and thank you so much for your time. And that's a wrap for this episode of Riding Counsel with Richard Jaffe. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed the ride, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share with your fellow riders. Until next time, keep the rubber side down and ride safe.